And welcome back to Immigration Ain't Easy. I'm Mo Goldman. You can find the podcast at immigrationainteasy.com. And today I have two guests, and I'm honored to have them both on. The first one is Danny Rizzo, who is a well-known immigration attorney based out of Buffalo, New York. She's got, I think, almost 17 years or more of experience. How long have you been in this game, Danny? Do you know?
Since right before 9/11, if you count my
Okay.
experience as a paralegal. Yeah.
So you've got a lot of experience, like 2 decades worth. Danny's, so something that people don't often know is that immigration lawyers are not all just, okay, we defend people on deportation or, we do a mixed bag of immigration. There are some of us that are more subspecialized, and Danny's specialization is in employment and business related immigration and investments. And she's done a lot of work with multinational corporations. She helps investors and people in trade. She's done a lot of work on the border with NAFTA, what used to be known as NAFTA, but now is the USMCA, with getting visas for them. And she's just an all around great person. So, first of all, thank you for joining me, Danny. Um, we are also joined by one of Danny's clients, who's Akash Desai, who is the co-CEO of a company called CyFlare, CyFlare Security, which is a small IT risk management company. I think you're based in New York State, right?
I am sunny Buffalo, New York, Mo.
and uh, and cybersecurity is something that is near and dear to my heart because I had been the victim of ransomware.
Oh, oh man,
So
that's no fun.
I might have needed your assistance at that time, but that was like 8 years ago. Um, and your mission is to simplify cybersecurity and deliver solutions that empower organizations to protect their digital assets in a confident sort of way, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Helping people protect what they love and cherish.
Now, before I get back to Danny, let me just ask, where are you originally from? I know you're an immigrant to the U.S. and you're a U.S. citizen now.
Yeah, I'm Indian, but I actually never grew up in India. My family was in Ethiopia for 4 generations, and then with some of the political instability there, the coup, our our business and our house was nationalized. So my parents went to India. I kind of ended up in the U.S. thanks to some really wonderful folks. So that's my journey.
Did you come here on a student visa originally?
I did, yeah. I came here in high school.
Okay.
So did 2 years of high school and college. Got married, and here we are.
The rest is history.
That's right.
Um, all right, so we'll come right back to you. But Danny, so you always in northern or upstate New York, or where did you grow up?
Yep, I'm from upstate New York. I grew up in a small town called Horseheads.
And so what got you into the immigration law field? Like, what was the motivating, issue? Like, was it something that you fell into, or how did that happen?
It was blind luck, I think. So after I graduated from college as an English major, I did not know what I was doing after college and was looking for jobs in Buffalo and found a posting for a paralegal position with an immigration lawyer who was advertising that he wanted someone with creative writing skills. And I was like, oh, good, that's my only skill. So I applied for it and got it, and absolutely fell in love with it. The clients were just some of the most interesting people I'd ever encountered. And after a couple of years, I decided to go to law school. So.
Did you have any, like, I know some people have a strong connection with their own families immigrant story, did you have any sort of like connection that might have at some point, even given you an extra like boost to want to do this?
Not personally, no. My family, I found out through DNA testing, was some of the earliest settlers to New York State from England. So I don't know.
Oh, well, that's pretty awesome too. Um, we can call you a part of the pioneer families. And so you went into initially working just straight into business and employment based immigration. Has that always been your trajectory?
It has, yeah. That was the firm I initially started out with. That's what they did, and I learned that by working there.
And yeah, so you had to deal, I'm sure, with a lot of Canadian clients, I would imagine.
Yeah, just because of my location in Buffalo, where my office is 5 minutes from the Peace Bridge, so we just naturally have a lot of Canadian clients.
Since when you began, have you seen significant differences in how the Customs and Border Protection handles or treats Canadians specifically? I mean, I know a lot of people don't understand. They think that, Canadians can just like cross over and next thing you know, they can be here and, do what they please. But there are rules that have to be followed. And many of them have to get visas like the TN, which was the NAFTA based visa. What sort of changes have you seen, or have you seen much change over the last couple decades, or is it pretty consistent?
Well, USMCA or NAFTA has been in effect since the 90s, right? So the
Yeah, I
whole
think it was 94. Yeah.
yeah, the whole time that I've been practicing, so that has not changed at all, or at least the immigration provisions haven't changed. So the legal standards haven't shifted at all, and I think CBP has been remarkably consistent in applying them over that time. I send most clients to the Peace Bridge just because of where I'm located, and the officers there are really good. They have great training. They are one of the bigger ports for free trade entries, and so there's a lot of historic knowledge there that they're great to work with.
A lot of people who I've come across over the years that look at these TN visas and try to consider them are always saying, ooh, what about like the management consultant category or the economist category? Or they're trying to fit what would be like a square peg in a round hole, because most of the time they don't meet what would be the definitions of this. Is this something that you've had to, I would imagine, deal with on a consistent basis, where you have to try to like tell people, no, this is not a good idea, you're going to end up having a problem?
Yeah. So management consultant is one of the probably the most abused TN category, because it's one of only a handful of the categories that don't require a bachelor's degree. So anybody who doesn't have one tries to pigeonhole themselves into that category. And also, it's not defined well. And I think people hear management and they think
it's business
position, but it's not. It's somebody who's consulting to management. So I turn down a fair number of people if they don't qualify. And a lot of times I'm reviewing cases after they've been denied, after they've tried to apply in that category, and a lot of times there's nothing that can be done to rehabilitate that.
And having you on is good, because I think I haven't covered the TN that much in depth, but for people who are listening, there's only, I think it's like 63 occupational categories that qualify for this type of visa. And there isn't like, let's say someone who wants to do, business marketing or management. There's not like a category, a subcategory for that. And so you'll end up with a lot of people who think, oh, I could try to, like you said, pigeonhole into this management consultant category. And that is a problem, because you have more and more people who try to do that. It minimizes the legitimacy of that category, and it gets even more scrutinized.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. And you see that also with like scientific technician. I mean, if you go down the list, it's always kind of funny to see, what a lot of them are engineering or science based, professional type jobs. But then there's like forestry or forester or something like that. And you're like, how the hell did this end up in this thing? Like, who was the lobbyist that was like pushing to add this into it? um, so I'll just pivot to Akash. And I will ask you, so how did you get connected to Danny?
So we actually went to college together. I can't remember, Danny, maybe a year off or something. But
I graduated
um,
in '01. Yeah.
yeah, well, okay, I was '01 as well. So yeah, we went to college together. And then incidentally, the immigration attorney that did my paperwork for naturalization, etc., was the attorney that Danny was working for. So Buffalo is a very small
I
community.
was going to
Well,
say very incestuous story there.
yeah,
So did you go to University of Buffalo? Is that where you were, or what
no, no,
college were you at?
it's Houghton University. So it's the southern part of Western New York. Yep. I like to joke. I say it's middle of nowhere, take a left, and you found it. So, but it was a great small liberal arts school.
Hmm. And just, I mean, it's weird when I grew up, when I was growing up as an immigration lawyer. It was around the same time Danny got into immigration law. I was in New York, and I'm just going to take a shot in the dark because I don't have your full resume in front of me, Danny. But did you work? You worked in Buffalo for a lawyer up there when you started out, right?
I did.
Was it ICE?
Yeah.
Jim Ice? Well, there
Yep.
you go. Because the only reason I asked that was I remember one of my early experiences trying to learn about TN visas was through him and what he would like I think he wrote a few publications, and also I would see him on message boards talking about, TN. So I actually learned a lot about TN, NAFTA, USMCA visas through your boss.
Oh, that's so funny. He is a great teacher. Yeah.
Yeah, and he is, I mean, like from what I've seen, he's basically like one of the most preeminent like border, type of Canadian border lawyers doing immigration stuff. That's pretty cool. So now I've called you out for your lawyer too, Akash. I'm revealing all your attorney-client confidences. Um, so you become at the time. What were you studying in college?
So I was a economics and biology major. Wanted to do pre-med, realized I couldn't stand blood. So that was a quick ending to that.
Yeah,
And then that's a long-winded story, but that's how I got into technology. Because at that time, anyone that could, sling a little bit of code,
coding.
that's what we were all doing.
And what like drew you to doing specifically cybersecurity? Was it more of just like the knowing that there was such a high need for that, or what drew you to starting? Because you had already started at least one other company, right?
Yeah, so cyber was certainly not a thing back in 2001, right? It was the wild, I mean, it was the good times. It was like the 60s. But it's my first company was an electronic medical record system that I built. And after selling that company, I had started a company that did customer engagement as a service, and we did a lot of that work for big brands like the IRS was a customer, United Healthcare, Wells Fargo. But after I sold that company, the thing I realized was with both of those companies, they were regulated industries. There was a lot of demand on the kind of spend that we had to do, right, for cybersecurity, for compliance, and with every check I wrote, I never felt safer. So I figured there must be a better way of doing it. So that's why I'm in cyber.
And yeah, I was saying a little earlier, I had my computers hacked And one day, I mean, it's just kind of a funny side story. One day it was right after Thanksgiving, it was Black Friday. This is about 7 years ago. My mom comes to the office and she can't access any of our files. And, we thought we had good security. We were like, yeah, we're fine. Who's going to hack an immigration lawyer? And what are they going to want? Of course, they wanted a Bitcoin or something. At the time it was like $80,000 in value, and she saw a message on the hard drive because she couldn't access the files, and it basically was like a threat ransom letter, a message, and what a mess! What a total
Yeah.
mess! Like
Yeah, it's no one is immune, especially now with AI and automation. They're just running ransomware bots against everyone, right? Like whatever if they find an opening. So yeah, I
And I
agree.
can't imagine these large companies having to contend with that and try to ward it off, and the amount of cost it takes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, and that's the challenge in our industry, right? Like going back to immigration, the amount of people we need to kind of counter the threat that we're seeing, is just it's orders of magnitude beyond what the labor market has right now. So for us, finding talented people is unbelievably hard. And we've gone to great lengths, both with getting some H-1B folks, doing creative recruitment strategies with colleges where we're actually kind of teaching students, doing like long-term internships, all the way to opening up offices offshore. So it's tough.
So let me ask you then, Danny. Akash mentioned the H-1Bs. Can you, I think it would be good for the listener to know, like, what is the process for somebody who is not like exempt, like a private small business, like what we have here? They're not exempt from the annual quota. Can you just give a quick like rundown of, how many visas are available in a fiscal year, and how hard it is to even obtain those visas? The
Yeah.
H-1B specific.
Yeah, so there's an annual cap on the number of new H-1B visas that can be issued each year. It is set at 65,000 per year, and then there's an additional 20,000 that are set aside for people who have a U.S. master's degree from a nonprofit or institution in the United States, accredited nonprofit. So they run the lottery every year in March. In 2020, it became fully electronic. Before that, we used to have to prepare all of our cap cases as full petitions, mail them into USCIS. They would pick out of the pile and then ship the rest back. So we don't have to do that anymore. That has made things more efficient, but it's also increase the number of people who register in the lottery. So that means the odds of selection are much lower than they used to be. There also have been a lot of people figuring out different ways to game the system. The most noteworthy one being that beneficiaries, so the individuals who want the H-1B visas, would get multiple different employers to submit lottery registrations for them. And the system used to be for like from 2020 to 2024, the system would be that they would just pick individual registrations out as opposed to picking a name out from the lottery. So it really did increase the odds of selection if you had multiple companies registering for you. So these people were not only gaming the system, but probably their prospective employers as well. So each company that was registering them thought they were getting this person if they got picked, but obviously they can only work for one of them. So there were some disappointed employers as well, but they changed the selection system last year. So now they call it a beneficiary centric selection system. So now they pick by individuals' names, and they go by their passport number. Now there is some, like, some people have multiple passports, like they are dual citizens, and that could still be used. But they're going. USCIS is going to a lot of effort to make sure they're not giving more than one registration selection to each individual registrant. So if somebody does get picked, they can still have multiple registrations, but it's not going to increase their odds of selection. And if their name gets picked, then they got to pick which company they're going to work for. So I think that's going to help, going forward with leveling the playing field for everybody who registers. And they've also increased the registration fee this year. It used to be $10 to register a person. Now it's $215. Hopefully that's enough that
might ward off a few people from trying to game the system.
Yeah, right.
But still, I mean, it does speak to, and I think this is something that Akash can also talk about, is it speaks to the fact that there's just not enough visas. We don't have enough. And so what has been your experience so far as trying to, navigate this system, Akash, and talk about the costs that a company like yours has to bear in doing this? Because I don't think people realize, and then you can both chime in on this, how much a company has to invest not only to pay at or above the prevailing wage, but also the fees that you have to pay to the U.S. government just to get an H-1B reviewed, not even approved.
Yeah, it's there is certainly significant cost, right? But again, at the same time, I don't think it's undue cost either. So, I totally get it. But and Danny would probably know better than I do on the cost, but there's certainly a cost per application. Then there is, and I'll butcher this, Danny, but there is a priority processing, essentially. I don't know if that's the term, but we try to sometimes pay that for our
Oh,
employees.
premium processing. Yep.
Premium processing. There you go. Yep, exactly. And and again, some of that, I don't know if that really helps or not, but it certainly reduces the stress for our employees. So it's almost like you do it. Um, so there's that cost, the cost of just compliance and going through the process and the paperwork. For a small company that doesn't have a dedicated HR person, that's pretty tough. We're, at CyFlare is about 72 people. Um, so, for us, doing that paperwork with a part-time HR, I do some of that stuff myself, right? Or help. So, that's quite a bit of energy. But honestly, a large part of that, and with our H-1B, our employees needing H-1B, luckily, we've never experienced some of the issues that Danny was mentioning, right? Like people gaming the system, etc. These are people that have wanted to work for CyFlare. We have a really good relationship with them. But what that also does is there's all that emotional pressure on you too, because you really want that person to work for you, because they're friends. They're, like they've gotten to know them through an internship, as an example. That's how a lot of our H-1B folks come to us, is through internships. So, yeah, there is quite a bit of cost to that, emotional and financial.
And
I can
go
tell
ahead,
you
Danny.
the filing fees for a brand new H-1B petition are $3,380 if you add everything up. And that does not include premium processing, which if you add it's another $2,805. So it's closer to $6,000.
And just so people are aware, premium processing doesn't guarantee an approval. It just guarantees a faster review of 15 business days for H-1Bs. There's other, for different types of petitions. But, if you don't do premium processing and you're talking about the lack of peace of mind, there's no way to know how long it's going to take for that application to process. I mean, it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months. And then eventually you may be forced into premium processing anyways, because you're still waiting, several months later. So, that's the frustration, is the lack of knowing how long it will take and any semblance of transparency in that process. And then let's talk about the other pressure that you would feel as an employer. So let's say you get somebody their H-1B, usually the start date for a private business, if it's an initial one, not a transfer, which we call portability, would be October 1st, which is the start of the federal fiscal year when the H-1B quota is replenished. So you get your H-1B, everyone's pretty happy. The next question is, I want to stay with you. Can you help me get a green card? And that person, let's say, is from India. And now you're like, great, let's talk to Danny and go talk about what this process is going to entail. Tell me how that feels, Akash. And then Danny, talk about the practicality of, the wake up call people end up having when you end up like telling them what this process is going to, entail.
Yeah, so I got a great story for you, Mo. My earlier company, um, I actually had hired an Indian citizen, on an again, they did, the individual did an internship for my company. We really loved working with him. At that time, he was 25, and I say that for a reason. Um, and, we did the H-1B, and over the next decade or so, we continued renewing the H-1B. He wanted a green card. And so we did the paperwork, which was very arduous, and Danny can go into that. But after doing that, we just waited and waited and waited. Every 3 months, he would be checking on the website to see where kind of his case had gotten to. And, he's like, oh man, I still got years to go. So now he is 45 years old. We're still very good friends. He doesn't work for me anymore. He's still with my prior company, afraid to move, to a different company because he doesn't want to jeopardize his dates. So he's kind of stuck there. Um, and 20 years later, he's got a house, he's got two kids, he's married, but he still doesn't know if he's going to be able to reside in this country, which is bonkers to me, frankly.
It is. Danny, so can you can you talk about what does this process entail? Like why and why is it, in this case, the guy's now 20 years later, he's still in limbo waiting. He has you would think by now he'd be a citizen and he'd have a right for a vote and a voice in our society and an ability to serve on a jury. He's still in limbo and he's probably still on his H-1B. I mean, or no, he probably has a work permit, EAD, but maybe not because it sounds like he might still be stuck waiting. I mean, who knows? But like, why is this happening? Why are, especially from India, people waiting for decades?
So it has to do with congressionally imposed limits on the number of immigrant visas, which is the visas that get you a green card, that they can be issued per year. So the government's fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th each year. And each year the numbers get replenished on October 1st, but they are limited so there's an overall limitation on the number that can be issued, and then that is broken down into different preference categories and different countries of birth. So there are employment-based and there are family-based preference classifications. The ones we're talking about are all the employment-based categories, and then there's 5 different preference classifications depending on the type of petition that gets filed. So the ones we're talking about are mostly based on PERMs. So that's a labor certification process. And those are EB2s and EB3s, right? So employment-based second and third preference classification. EB2s are people that have whose positions require and they have a master's or higher degree or a bachelor's plus 5 years of experience or more. EB3 is skilled workers and professionals. So that could be people whose positions require 2 years of experience or more or a bachelor's degree. So you have to look at what preference classification they're in, and then it goes by country of birth. And each country is in the number of immigrant visas that can be issued per preference category each fiscal year. And India has a high volume of immigration to the United States, and that's the reason it's backlogged. There are just more people in that line than there are for any other country who are waiting for employment based immigrant visas. And they're very highly educated and highly skilled immigrants for the most part. So they're falling into those categories. Lots of people with master's degrees. I've worked with doctors who are serving U.S. patients in medically underserved areas. It's engineers, architects, a lot of people in STEM fields for which there's simply a shortage of workers in the U.S. So these are critical positions that they're filling, but by a luck of where they happen to be born and the way the laws are written, it's creates this huge backlog. So right now, the cutoff dates, I haven't looked at the visa bulletin today, so don't quote me on this, but it's something like 2012 or 2013. People who started the process then are just now eligible to file the last step of the green card process. So it takes a really long time to get through that process. Fortunately, there is a law that allows people who are waiting in that line to keep renewing their H-1B status indefinitely until a visa number is available. But from what I've seen in the last 20 years of working on these cases, it really seems like the Indian citizens who come here, usually they come on F1 student visa to H1B to green card, and they're stuck in this line for their entire adult working lives, basically, and eventually get it, typically. But they're sacrificing their lives for their kids.
Yeah, and the other issue, so there's a lot of issues that come up, and I'll come, back to you, Akash, in a minute. But first of all, I just wanted to say, anyone who's listening to this, and I've said this in other podcast episodes, search Visa Bulletin, look at the Visa Bulletin, and learn, and look at the charts, and you will learn why one of the root causes for our immigration problems, which is that we don't have enough green cards or immigrant visas that are being allocated for the worldwide population, which forces people to have to look at all these other avenues. And sometimes people give up and leave, and so on and so forth. The other thing I'll mention is I interviewed a brilliant individual, David Beer, who works at the Cato Institute. I interviewed him back in December, and he has done the crunching of the numbers. In his estimation, right now, if you're an EB2, which is a master's or advanced degree level Indian national, and you're going through this process, the wait time is going to be 150 years. 150 years. And he bases it off of the fact that there's like 430,000 people in the backlog, in the queue. There's only about 3,000 visas per fiscal year available for that category. And so do the math. At the end of the day, the math, it adds up. The other big problem, especially for these individuals who are stuck in limbo, they're children. Because the children, when they turn 21 years old, they often age out and they have to find a different path, their own path. And many of them are on H4 visas. And then all of a sudden, when they're 21, or right before they're 21, they have to switch to a student visa. They haven't lived in India or any other country for most of their lives. They only know the United States. And next thing you know, they're having to figure out their own path to this. So let me ask you, Akash, your friend, is this something that is demoralizing to him? How does it impact this individual and his family? Or has he not talked to you about that? Or have you witnessed how it impacts people?
Yeah, no, we talk about it quite a bit, and his statement to me is, he's like, bro, I feel like an indentured servant. He's like, if I could do things again, maybe I would have done something differently. Maybe I would have tried Canada. But he's like, I'm just too invested at this point to do anything different. So, and he laughs. Luckily for him, his children were born here. So, he jokingly says, well, if this doesn't work out, my
They'll
kids
be
can
able to
maybe
sponsor
sponsor
him.
me.
That's usually the other way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, it's pretty wild, right? You're constantly in a state of limbo, like you said.
Did you want to add something, Danny?
I've just heard really heartbreaking stories from clients on this too. I mean, I've had more than one client break down in tears just talking about what this kind of weight has done to their families. And it's really devastating for people who have done everything right. I had somebody a couple years ago, an Indian woman who is a brilliant researcher. She played a role in developing vaccine for COVID, right? I mean, just somebody that's a great mind. And we got her an EB1 as an outstanding researcher. So first preference classification, and shortly after we got it, that category backlogged the visa number cutoff date, and so she wasn't able to file her 485 right away. And her daughter is about to age out, and there's nothing we can do about. We did everything we could to try to speed up the process, and she was just heartbroken. She was doing that to try to get under the wire so that her daughter could get her green card before she turned 21.
And as a business owner, Akash, when you're dealing with people and their wants to, obtain or attain this American dream, um, I think it ends up having to be kind of a collective conversation between yourself, your employee, and the lawyer to, give them a bit of a reality check on what this process is going to entail, right?
Yeah, absolutely is. And there's a little bit of that starry-eyed, yeah, it'll work out for me, and then they kind of hear what the process is, and it really scares them. But what? The other thing that's been an interesting topic of conversation, and this is probably just in from my vantage as a from the technology sector, which is the workforce is very mobile now, and so the greater conversations are, well, do you really want to do this? I mean, you could stay home, have a U.S. job, make more money, be with your family, not leave your homeland, um, and nothing stops you from doing that, right? So we have a an office that we opened up in Nairobi, Kenya, 17 individuals that are cybersecurity analysts for us today, in addition to the 72 we have here. And, these guys are probably in the top 5% of earners in their country, maybe top 1%. Um, and, nothing changes for them. So the workforce has become a lot more mobile, so there are more options for people. But I kind of worry about our country because what happens when all these smart people decide to just stay home? The competitive advantage these countries are going to get is something we're losing out on, in my opinion.
And the
Um,
money that they're earning is not being recycled back into the United States, which is, I think, when we talk about America first mentality or what's good for the United States, having those individuals physically working and buying gas here and going to the store and and maybe spinning off and starting their own companies and innovation is lost because those other countries are going to gain that.
it's very true. And, it just in my own family, the family that I have in India, all the kids that are graduating college and then trying to go find jobs in there's more of them going now to Australia and Canada than they are in the US. They're like, we just don't want to deal with feeling like we're unwanted. So, they're going to better places.
It's a shame. It really is because
Right.
when you look at the United States and you think, oh, it's a melting pot, and you I think in my generation and in I think all of our generations, we all grew up thinking, oh, the United States is that place where people will go and they're going to have opportunity. And then the reality check happens when you become an immigration lawyer. You're like, oh shit, this isn't the way it was supposed to be. It's like everything you try to do, the government resists and fights you on. You have an extraordinary artist. No, that person's not extraordinary enough. And you're like, what the hell's going on here? um, so let me ask you just again, kind of, going back a little bit to your upbringing. Did you have a connection, like much of a connection with India, or was most of your connection with Ethiopia growing up, and then you kind of had an ancillary connection to India?
Yeah, ancillary is the right word. So, Indian genetically, right? We're born Indian, but like I mentioned, four generations in Africa. The difference and the reason why there was still a connection to India is the simple fact that Ethiopia did not allow anyone that was not of Ethiopian blood to have Ethiopian citizenship. So we were really just foreigners in a place where we had been for four generations, which was really bizarre. And the whole time it was, at least in my generation, like you said, Mo, everyone saw America as the place to be. And my dad always said, "Oh, I always wanted to go to America." His father, my grandfather, wouldn't let him. And so he's like, when you made it, I was so happy. And I think we could get back to that someday, hopefully, back in at this country.
Do you feel like you finally found your like home and identity once you like got your citizenship here, like that this was where you were meant to be?
Um,
I'm
in
just kidding,
in
not
some
to put
ways,
words
Mo.
in your mouth.
No, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a big part of me, right? Like my wife is American. She's a farmer's daughter, in from southern Western New York. So yeah, a piece of that. But at the same time, I think there's this concept called third culture kid, which is really what I identify as, which you never really feel like you're part of any one country. You are, and people accept you, but you're still always a little bit other. And I think most immigrants will feel that for the rest of their lives, but it's just normal.
You're one of those globalists that Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity are railing against. No, I'm just.
Well, I don't know. I don't listen to them, so I don't know
I know.
what they
Well,
say.
I do. I listen, so you don't have to. No,
Uh,
so uh, in Ethiopia, I'm just curious. Did you face like discrimination there? Like, I mean, uh, was there a small population of Indians, or what was the like ratio like
yeah,
there?
yeah. It was a pretty sizable population. It wasn't large enough, and we didn't control. We didn't contribute to the economy to as large an extent as like Uganda. Where they expelled all Indians, etc. But we were small, but it's one of those things where 99% of the time we felt completely loved and accepted. But when things get tough, there's always the desire to point to the other. So we felt that a little bit. Uh,
Uh, Danny, so what keeps you like motivated and going? Because I will tell you, being an immigration lawyer, it's a grind. And this is a question I like to ask every immigration lawyer because, going back at least the last decade, it's been such a roller coaster, and there's so much like stress that comes with the work we do because we're dealing with people's lives and we want to help them and we want them to obtain their goals, but it's hard to do so in a time where there's so much uncertainty. It's uncertainties abound. What keeps you going back each day and keeps you motivated?
Well, I guess a combination of things. I mean, I really enjoy my clients. So I think that's a big part of it. I like talking to them. I like helping them, and another part of it is just I maintain some idealism about what our immigration system should be and the type of country that I want to live in. And I feel like this is a role where, in a small way, I can help to bring that about, just by representing people diligently and doing everything I can to help, you know.
And what, if you have an interesting story, like what was kind of the craziest thing that you've had to experience with immigration over, or one of the crazy things that might have, I mean, it seems like a lot of immigration lawyers have kind of these quirky stories where like you file an application and you think, oh, this is going to go through no problem, or the government does something all, backwards. Have you had any interesting stories that you want to share or no?
Sorry, that's just a broad question.
It is. Well, I'm just curious if there was any like real wild thing that you ever had to come across.
Oh,
you see, I froze her on that
froze
one.
up on me.
She's frozen.
Uh,
I think I
oh man,
lost Danny.
that's deep inside. Yeah, she's
Wow,
like, I'm out of here.
Danny, you'll come back, and when you come back, we'll get her back in here. Maybe I can kick her out of here. But all right, so just coming right back to CyFlare, to a layperson, somebody who doesn't understand or know what you do, what does your company do?
Yeah, so what we do is manage and detect, right? So we know that, look, no matter how many layers of protection you've got, right, Mo, or a business as well, something will
Oh,
always go through.
Oh, she's back. All
Hey,
right,
there you are, Danny.
Danny, we're back onto another topic, but
I
go ahead.
wanted to avoid that question, I promise.
No, well, now you've had a few minutes to think about it. We'll come back to you, but Akash is telling us about his business. So go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, so as I was saying, it's we know that something, no matter how many layers of protection you have, something's going to get through, right? So we're the company that watches behind the scenes and for any kind of anomalies, and we detect those threats and then we respond to it. Kind of like an immune system. No matter how much you wash your hands, germs are going to get in your body, and then it's the immune system that picks up. So that's us.
What year did you start this company?
This would be as after I sold my last one, so 2018, 2019.
And as far as growth goes, are you happy with how it's grown?
Um,
I mean,
yeah,
obviously, no one's
it feels
ever
like a
100% happy, but
well, yeah, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because part of you is like, well, that means there's just enough bad things happening in the world that we're growing. But
yeah,
yeah, we've gone from zero and two people in a garage type of deal to 72
steady.
people
Yeah.
here, more out there, and we tend to grow like double every year. So.
How do you position yourself from other companies? Like, what makes your company maybe more unique? Or, like, if somebody's out looking for a company to do this for their business, what would you say to someone who is like, "Oh, I'm looking at three different options." Like, what makes you different or unique?
Yeah, I think we give three magical gifts that no one else does. The first one is um, companies have a whole bag of parts, right? Even small organizations, the kind of technologies they use are all over the place. And it's very few companies that can truly give you that full 360-degree visibility, right, into everything that's coming in. We're watching all of your telemetry, which is very hard to do. And then number two is there's if you're watching everything, there's a lot of noise. So how do you find that needle in the haystack, right? And how do you do it quickly and consistently? And we get our customers to 98% true positive rates. And then the third one is once we see something and we say something, we do something, which is we don't just say, oh, this is happening. We can really go into your systems and take the remediation actions, which hard to do for most.
All right, Danny, you've had enough time now. Do you have a story, or do you not have a story that you'd like to share?
I'm thinking of several, but I think I have one that's probably a good one to share. So there has been an issue that has come up for men who were born in Iran and served compulsory military service in the IRGC. That organization was deemed a terrorist organization by the Trump administration in, I believe, 2018 or 2019. But the IRGC is one of two military branches in Iran. And when men are of a certain age, they are required by law to register for the military, and then they get put into that one or another one, and they don't have any control over it. And if they don't register, they're breaking Iranian law, right? So they don't have a choice in the matter. But if a man serves in the IRGC, because it is designated as a terrorist organization, they become inadmissible to the United States as a result. So I have had more than one client over since it was designated as a terrorist organization who was a dual, like born in Iran, became a Canadian citizen, and then is attempting to enter the US to work, and has been refused. Those cases, because they're Canadian citizens, they're visa exempt, so they should just be able to enter at the border. But if it does come up at the border, they ask all Iranian men that question if they have provided any military service. But I had a couple who were both born in Iran, Canadian citizens, a few years back. The woman was a researcher and had been granted a J1 status to come in and lecture at a university, and her husband, who had served in the IRGC in like the 1990s, before it was even designated a terrorist organization, it came up when they were attempting to enter the US that he had done that military service, and both he and his wife were refused admission as a result. And they were told, despite the fact that you're Canadian citizens and visa exempt, you need to go apply for a visa. And the reason CBP, the officers at the border, do that is because the State Department has more resources to conduct, background investigations on people. So that can only be done through the visa application process. And what we're seeing in those cases is that they sit at the consulate forever, and they're put in administrative processing, and it can be years before any decision is issued.
Have you done any litigation like writs of mandamus, or do you refer that out to people who can, or in cases like that, is that even a consideration?
So I don't file those myself, but I have consulted with another attorney who does do that type of work, and he said that they're losing on them.
They're losing? Oh, yeah. My God.
So
yeah, it's
security
national security. Yeah. It's crazy, Akash. Like, I mean, you'll get these cases and they'll end up in this administrative processing for an indefinite period of time. And then their only option is to sue the government under a writ of mandamus. And sometimes you can actually get them to, complete their job and do it. But sometimes you lose and then they're stuck. So this person, just Danny, this person's still stuck?
So
hold on a second. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, I came in just to try to help after the border refusal, so I wasn't the main attorney on it. And I don't know where it's ended up because I tried to resolve it with the port and we couldn't, so it ended up back at the consul. So I don't know about that one, but I have another one right now that's been stuck for several months at the consulate, and this guy didn't even serve in the military, and he has a military exemption certificate, and he was still required to go to the consulate, and it's been sitting.
Sorry, Akash, what were you going to say?
Oh no, I was just going to say what's really fascinating about this conversation is realizing what some policy that gets passed has such ramifications for like this tiny subset of people, and sometimes to like, and makes it really painful. It's just amazing to me.
Well, and not only is it sometimes like official policies, sometimes it's like memorandums that come out of the US government that just directs them to do something, or internal policies at different offices. It's there's so much inconsistency from one administration to the next administration that we end up just sometimes like it really can be a guessing game. Like you don't know who's going to get stuck, who's not going to get stuck, what sort of old issue might, crop up. It's crazy.
Or even tweets. I remember during the last Trump administration, the
Mm-hmm.
American Immigration Lawyers Association put out guidance on like hierarchy of authorities, and at the bottom they had Twitter, which is accurate because there were policies being enunciated on Twitter and
On
nowhere else.
Twitter,
But it's just
official government policies.
yes.
I mean, this is what we've definitely we haven't hit rock bottom probably, but we're pretty close.
It's like Mark Twain, Mo. 140 characters. That's the best policy, right? Must be well thought out.
You know what? I'm all for brevity, but not that brief when it comes to something that's going to affect people's lives. Like at least one page, please. But yeah, and right now we're not sure what's going to happen next. Like, what's the next big change that's going to occur? Danny, during the first Trump administration, did you see much difference in the employment-based processing, or what were there any like drastic things that occurred that impacted your clientele?
I would say the biggest one was H-1Bs. There was a huge focus on tightening up the H-1B program, and so I had to start keeping a list of all the requests for evidence that I had done, because almost every single H-1B petition we filed, they came back and said, prove to us that this is really a specialty occupation. We were ordering expert opinion letters from experts to opine that a position was a specialty occupation. I mean, the amount of work that went into just proving an engineer is a specialty occupation, even though it's listed in the regulations as an example of a specialty occupation, was just outlandish. So we are still getting everything through, but it just was so much more effort to do just the most basic.
And when we talk about government efficiency, the amount of cost that's wasted on adjudicating these things, and again, part of it is like we get rejections on applications for ridiculous reasons. And each time the government will reject that paper filing, I mean, we can go back to the old H-1B, the way they did it. At least it's a little more efficient now where they select you. But you used to file the application in full as of April 1st and then wait, and then you'd have to wait for the whole packet to be sent back to you. And each time it would get sent back, it would cost our government like $40 to $50 in postage. I mean, it was what a waste. And now we see that all the time with like the mailroom rejecting applications for just ridiculous reasons. And so, who knows what the future holds, but it's not looking it's kind of bleak right now. And speaking of the future, so what's the future for the company, Akash? Do you have, any exciting things coming down the road, or?
We're in the middle of a couple of acquisitions. I think the slowing down economy means any companies that have a little bit of scale tend to win out. So we're doing a couple of acquisitions. We're opening up, going back to immigration because we can't find the people. We're actually opening up an office in the Philippines. So again, go where the talent is, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, we're pretty excited about all of that.
And it also opens up the door for the potential of L1 visa transfers.
That's right.
That's your next conversation, guys.
Well, it's so funny you mentioned that because Danny, I'm going to be forwarding you an email from probably on Monday about it.
Yep. I mean, seriously, that's been a discussion I've had with a lot of businesses is like if you can't get them this way, you've got to look at other avenues, which might mean having someone work a year for a foreign related entity and then bringing them over. And then also potentially getting them if they're a manager level or executive level, you can maybe get them a EB1 level green card, which won't take 150 years, hopefully, if they're from
Uh,
India, that is.
well,
But yeah, it's crazy, man. What a
well,
nutty system.
it is crazy, and thank God for people like Danny that help us
Yep,
navigate the waters,
it's so
for
true.
sure.
Yeah. So Danny, do you have any final thoughts?
Um, no, I don't think so. I just you hear a lot of rhetoric about people should just get in line and wait for this, but I think what people don't realize is that for many people there is no line. The classifications that allow you to get a green card are very very narrow, based on employment, and not there isn't a line for everyone, and for those for whom there is a line, it's a long line for a lot of people. So this is people are really paying for this, with a lot of
Their
sweat.
lives their
Yeah,
lives are stuck, and I'm so appreciative of Akash for coming on and talking about these things, because I think one of the bigger problems we have is that we don't have enough individuals who are living this or experiencing this, or business owners who have to deal with these things, speaking out a little bit about it. I mean, it's not like it's taking a lot of courage to talk about these things, but it seems like a lot of businesses shy away from trying to get into the conversations on this because of the political nature that, tends to arise. So I want to thank you especially.
No, pleasure is all mine, and I think the only thing I would say that I hope your listeners take away is H-1Bs and foreign workers are not usually cheap labor. It's not like businesses are trying to cut costs by doing this. They have to meet the same dollar amounts, and there's additional cost to it. So it really is about finding the best people, the best talent, and bringing them and giving them jobs.
And also, I think people should understand that if we don't continue to expand on this or allow for better paths for people to come here, what you've talked about is going to be the reality that we're going to see, which is companies are going to say, okay, well, why should we bring them to the United States? We'll just put them in Nairobi. And that does not benefit the US.
It does not. The world is flat.
Yep. Well, there you go. That's a good way to end this conversation. So Akash and Danny, or D Riz, I guess we should call you. Um, Thank you so much. I also want to give a shout out to Danny's law firm, Phillips Lytle. That's where you work, right, Danny?
it is.
I'm like, I better make sure I'm getting it right. No, because I didn't mention that earlier, so I want to give it a little shout out. And again, CyFlare is the company. Akash, is it cyflare.com? Is that the website, or what website can people go and learn about your company?
Yeah. Hey, thanks for asking. Yeah, it's cyflare.com. So yeah, check us out if you can.
CyFlare.com.
You got it. You got it.
And thank you to everyone, all dozens and dozens of you who listen to Immigration Ain't Easy, soon to be thousands. We will have thousands I guarantee by 2030, I'll have at least 1,000 listeners to this podcast. And my daughter, Emma, who's the producer, is going to be hopefully not my producer at that point.
Well, thank you
Poor
for
Emma.
inviting me to the show, Mo. This was a lot of fun. Who thought like two lawyers and
And
a business guy can
techie,
have so much fun?
a
Yeah, exactly.
tech bro. Thanks, guys.